Finally, I'm getting around to teaching an Ashtakavarga course. This is something I've thought about doing for at least 5 years or so. But teaching Jaimini, Parashara system, Vimshatri and Rashi dasas, I've just taken up so much time, I just haven't gotten around to it till now. So, Ashtakavarga, what is that? Well, Ashtakavarga simply means 8 parts or 8 divisions. And the idea of Ashtakavarga is that a planet, wherever it is in the zodiac, wherever it is in the sky, is only going to do, have as much power or ability to perform as the other planets allow it to have. So it's this idea that every planet is dependent on the whole. Now normally when we look at astrology, we say, oh, this planet's in Aries, and it's the sun, it's exalted, that makes it good there. And we're just taking this one planet all by itself and saying it's good because it's in Aries, and it's exalted there. But what about all the other planets? If you've got a king and he's in a tower, but everyone else is on a mountain above the tower throwing rocks on the king, even though he's in his castle and his tower and in his exalted place, he's still going to get trashed. And that's the idea of Ashtakavarga, is that it's a way of looking at the whole of the chart. Meaning, what's this planet doing in the context of all the other planets and the Ascendant? So there's 7 planets and there's an Ascendant. Those are the 8 parts. What is a planet doing from all the other parts? That's the idea of Ashtakavarga. And it does it in a very simple way. Now, to help you kind of relate to it, a technique that's really commonly known in India, the most common singular technique, is simply that of transits placed from the moon. Based on where transits are from the moon, it's thought that the planet will do good or bad. For instance, the most famous thing is Sati Sakti. Saturn in the 12th from the moon, the 1st from the moon, and the 2nd from the moon is considered to be a troublesome Saturn transit. Or Saturn the 3rd, the 6th, and the 11th from the moon is considered to be an auspicious Saturn transit, and all the other transits are bad, but especially the 12th, 1st, and 2nd. And this is something everyone's heard about, their Sati Sakti, the terrible 7.5 years of bad Saturn transit around the moon. And so everyone's familiar with this idea that different planets from the moon do better or worse. Well, that's 1/8 part of Ashtakavarga. That's just considering where a planet is at from the moon. Okay? In Ashtakavarga, we're going to do that from all the planets though. So a planet might be good from the moon, but bad from every other planet, which means it's not going to be a planet that's going to be able to do that much. Okay? So when you look at your Gochara, your transits from the moon, realize that that's a very simple and limited technique. I have a video on that technique in the Positional Transits course, and I definitely recommend you watch that video. And you can watch that video right after this one and not even bother with the rest of this course until you watch that video. It'd be a good idea just to watch that Gochara video from the moon, the Transits from the Moon video, to give it an idea. Now, from the moon, when a planet is in a good position, then that means the moon is helping that planet do its job. And when a planet is in a bad position from the moon, it means the moon is not helping that planet do its job. That's all it means. But the moon is not the only planet that's helping a planet. All the planets are. So Saturn, okay, it's in the 12th from the moon. The moon is not helping Saturn do his job. But is the Sun, is Mars, is Mercury, is Jupiter, is Venus, is Saturn? Depending where Saturn's falling from all those other planets, and even from the Ascendant, we'll get an idea of if those other things, besides the moon, are helping Saturn do his job. And that's where Ashtakavarga comes into play. That's where we really see, from a holistic point of view, what the planet's capable of. If we just look at it from the moon, we are not going to see the entirety of the wholeness of what that planet can do. We're just going to see if the moon is helping it or not helping it. Okay? And I talk about that in that Gochara course. And the moon position is the most important position. There's a reason it was signaled out. in the sense of how we feel about our life. Okay? But when it comes to actually what's happening in our lives, we have to judge it from all the other planets. So when it comes to any concrete predictions, any concrete things, we have to look at where a planet is from all the other planets, not just from the moon. So, and I talked about this in the Gochara course, but I just wanted to mention this briefly so you get the idea of how we start thinking in Ashtakavarga. So, what is the moon? The moon is our individualized consciousness. It's what we're comfortable with. Okay? It's what we're used to. It's what we feel right about. Okay? It's what we've developed into, the being we've developed into at this moment of time. And we naturally get attached to that. We like it and we're comfortable with it. Now, when Saturn transits from the moon, at certain times, what is Saturn's job, first of all? Saturn's job is to teach us, is to burn our karma, right? To have us do things that we need to do. We just are responsible for doing these things. Maybe we're responsible for actually doing something, or maybe we are simply responsible for bearing a karmic burden and suffering for a while and having everything go wrong. We have these responsibilities, which is what Saturn is. Now, do those sound like fun things? Hell no, those don't sound like fun things. That's why Saturn is only good in the 3rd, 6th, and 11th from the moon. At that point, the person feels good about the karmic burdens of Saturn. Based on what they're comfortable with, what they can do naturally and readily and easily, those karmic burdens aren't very hard for them. They're actually an enjoyable part of life during that time. So the moon, what they're comfortable with, what they're used to, supports Saturn of doling out the karmic burdens when Saturn's in the 3rd, 6th, and 11th from the moon. But in all the other times, wherever else Saturn is, the moon is going, I don't like this. I don't feel like bearing these karmic burdens. These karmic burdens are not what I'm used to, what I feel comfortable with. And that makes sense, right? It wouldn't be normal to have, it'd be nice, but it wouldn't be normal if we were comfortable with Saturn beating us up all the time. But sometimes it feels all right, and that's when Saturn's in a good place. So I talk more about that in that other course, but keep that in your mind as an idea of what we're doing with Ashtakavarga. And that is, we are looking to see how a planet is getting supported by the other planets. So for instance, what is Mercury? Mercury is our communication and our skills, our skill set. Our ability to play the game of life so as to build the life we want. Okay? We do that through our own thinking and coming up with ideas, and we also do that through studying other people's lives and other methods and other ways of doing things and learning the right way to do things. While when a planet's in a good transit from Mercury's position, or in a good place from Mercury according to the Ashtakavarga, then the person's skill set is supporting that planet in its fruition. But if it's in a bad place, Mercury's skill set can't help it. So that's the thinking you want to do in Ashtakavarga to use it rightly. Because we don't want to just restrict ourselves and say, well, Mercury in this sign's good, and Venus in this sign is bad, and just give these kind of like good, this is bad, this is good type readings. Okay, those are really dull, and people won't come back to visit you again. We want to say, this planet is getting supported by these things that you're doing, but it's not quite giving you what you want because you're not getting support in this way, and help them understand the picture of their lives. Because it never helps to say it's good and bad. It helps to say, this is what's working, and this is what's not working, right? So we can do that with Ashtakavarga if we keep that thought in mind. Okay? So, what is Ashtakavarga? Well, according to Parashara, in the beginning of the chapter on Ashtakavarga, Maitreya, who's his disciple and who's been learning from him astrology, says, O venerable sage, you have described many kinds of effects relating to the planets and the bhavas, after incorporating the views of many sages and learns. But it is not possible to say with certainty if a particular effect is quite correct after considering the contradictions in the effects by the movements of the various planets. So everyone can relate to that. You learn all this stuff, all these juicy techniques, and you look at the chart and still you're confused, right? Because there's so many contradictions. Astrology, well, welcome to the world of contradictions. Then he goes on to say, as because of sinful deeds committed by people in Kali Yuga, their minds have become blunt. Be kind enough to describe a method which would enable even the shallow-minded persons to ascertain their happiness and sorrows and determine their longevity on the basis of the positions of the planets in transit. So he's saying, it's Kali Yuga, we're stupid. People don't have the depth to really piece together all these contradictions, all these pushes and pulls that everyone's under. You know, every choice, every decision, there's pushes and pulls. And the most crucial, hard to make decisions, there's the most equal push and pull. And that's why we go to the astrologer, and the astrologer looks at our chart and says, geez, I see tons of contradictions because the person has lots of pushes and pulls. That's the ironic thing about astrology. You come because you can't figure something out. But if you can't figure something out, it's because your horoscope has all these pushes and all these pulls, which means it's really hard for the astrologer to figure out what's going to happen. On the times where everything is peaceful and you know what's going to happen and you do what you want to do and you know everything's clear, that's the times when in your chart it's all a push or it's all a pull, and it's real easy for an astrologer to read what's going to happen. Okay? So it's one of the ironic things about astrology. We just don't predict the future. We predict the future by seeing all the things that are pulling inside of you. So if you're in a period of your life where all hell is confusion, then when we look at your chart, it's also, wow, this is a confusing, contradictory mess. And the astrologer has to sort that out. And so the more needy a person is for a reading, meaning the more confused and lost they are in their lives, the harder it is for the astrologer to predict their future. Okay? So keep that in mind as you go to astrologers. So he's basically saying, what's a way we can do this that even shallow-minded people, even the dumb people of Kali Yuga, can use astrology? And based on the movements of the planets, the transits, because Ashtakavarga is largely a transit-centered technique. The sage replied, O Brahman, you have put forth a very intelligent question. I will now describe the Shastra, which is the science, for the benefit of all. The Shastra in which there will be no contradictions in judging the effects of happiness and sorrows, and for determination of the longevity. Okay, and then he goes on to teach Ashtakavarga. So this sounds really good. Wow, you know, no contradictions. Wow, it's for the shallow-minded. Well, what this means is, Ashtakavarga is the astrology for dummies. Okay? However, we have to understand that dummies can only do so much with the horoscope. And you want to keep that in mind when you learn Ashtakavarga. Some people will write books on Ashtakavarga, and there's a lot of information on classical books that makes it seem like it's so easy to predict how many kids you're going to have, what direction your wife will come from, you know, what direction you might earn wealth from, you know, when you're going to have your good times, when you're going to have your bad times. It just seems, when you read some of these books, both the modern books and the classical books, that it's a simple cakewalk to do. Unfortunately, it's not. Ashtakavarga is clear, it's simple, it doesn't give you a lot of contradictions to deal with, it's very linear, but it's only going to show what it's going to show. You're not going to be able to handle everything with Ashtakavarga. You'll be able to do some things simply and well, and then you stop. And then if you want to do more, you're going to have to go to a deeper technique. All right? So I wanted just to emphasize that Ashtakavarga is not the answer to all our astrological woes when we can't figure something out. It's a good tool for what it can do, but it's a bad tool to try to force it to do something it doesn't do. I see a lot of astrologers just use Ashtakavarga in this very sort of sloppy way of, you know, acting like it's the Ashtakavarga that's the decisive, most overriding factor in their charts. And it's not. It's something that does what it does, and if you can figure out what it's going to do, you can say something that's true about the person's life. Okay? But you can't expect to handle every situation accurately with Ashtakavarga to the level of fulfillment the person wants. Okay? So, if we're going to use something, it's important to understand the limitation of that thing. Then we can use it well, right? Okay? So, but if we expect something to do something it doesn't, we quickly get into trouble. So one of the goals of this course is for us to explore Ashtakavarga really thoroughly, and even explore some of the myths of Ashtakavarga, and to find out what we can really expect from this system of simplicity that's streamlined without contradictions. What can we really expect to get out of it? Okay? How can we really use it? When I resort to Ashtakavarga the most is when I'm tired, when I'm feeling like a shallow-minded person, and someone just asks me something, I just want to answer it and go to bed, right? So I'll just answer to the best I can with that, and I'm not expecting it to be the ultimate, most deep, most serious answer. It's just an answer that's going to handle it right now. That's how you want to look at Ashtakavarga. In the morning, I can wake up and I can go deeper into their charts and then talk to the person for 3 hours. But sometimes I don't have energy and I just want to say something simple to help them see the situation in a way that they can be at peace with it. But it's not everything I could ever say about the situation. But sometimes I don't want to say everything I could say about the situation. That's when I resort to Ashtakavarga. Okay? When you read the astrology books on Ashtakavarga, whether the new modern books, which are compilations of the stuff from the old books, or you go directly to the old books, it's really going to sound like, wow, I can do so much with Ashtakavarga. You know, they have techniques for predicting the amount of kids. They have techniques for telling you what direction to have your bedroom in your house, where to have your kitchen and your bathroom in your house, where to put your kids in your house, where to put your own bedroom in your house. You know, they basically have a whole system of feng shui or vastu, of setting up your house based on Ashtakavarga. So it's just a lot of fun. It's a whole branch of Vedic astrology. Okay, and it's a completely separate branch. And that's one reason it's taken me this long to get around to teaching it, because I've been climbing these other trees and standing on these other branches of astrology. But this is Ashtakavarga is a complete system of astrology that for what it can do doesn't need anything else. It's just a system that you can use for what it's meant to. Alright, so as you use Ashtakavarga, keep in mind that it does what it does, but it's not everything. It's a branch on the tree, it's not the entire tree. But it's quite a large branch, okay? There's a lot of stuff to it. It's important to know how well a technique works with Ashtakavarga. So say you want to predict the amount of kids. Well, predicting the amount of kids is a tough nut to crack, because it's not 0 or 1, and it's not 1 or 2. It's 0, 1, or 2, or 3, or 4, or 5, or 6, or 7, or 8, or even 9 or 10, if a person's really got a heavy child karma. Okay, it's a variable number. So the average family has 2 to 4 kids. Okay, that means when somebody asks how many children you have, you can say the average is 2 or 3. Okay, so it has 2 possible answers, for the average person, but the answer could be 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. So you really have a multiple 5, choice question. How many kids am I going to have? Well, 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. That's within normal parameters these days. So if I get a technique that works 2 out of 10 times, 20% of the time, to tell the amount of children, that's only as good as taking a wild guess, right? Because if I have 5 variables, 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4, well, that's 1 out of 5 times, or 2 out of 10 times, I could guess the right thing just by, going eeny, meeny, miny, mo. So, any technique that predicts children more than 20%, the amount of children more than 20% accurately, is a good technique for predicting children. So if we can use Ashtakavarga to only predict it 40% of the time, its odds are twice as good as saying eeny, meeny, miny, mo. If we can predict it 60%, even though 60% is, ooh, that doesn't even sound good, it's still 3 times better than predicting with eeny, meeny, miny, mo. So, as we explore the techniques in Ashtakavarga, we're going to learn okay, statistically, how well is this technique using? Okay, I know I'm using a technique that's a very clear-cut technique where there's not a lot of contradiction, and I know it's accurate in this many out of 10 charts, in this many out of 100 charts. I need to know the percentage that I'm basing my prediction on. A person should know that with Ashtakavarga. Really, we should know it with all techniques. But with Ashtakavarga, we're most able to determine that percentage because it's a technique without tons of contradictions. Okay, so keep that in mind. Then the other very important thing I want everyone to contemplate on and really think about as you start to study Ashtakavarga, whether you go to other places to study Ashtakavarga or you come to my astrology-videos.com website to study Ashtakavarga, wherever you go to study Ashtakavarga, the most important thing I want you to take with you is that what Ashtakavarga is doing is it's indicating which planets are supporting another planet. You have to think of it that way. If you don't think of it that way, you'll misconstrue everything about what Ashtakavarga does. Okay? And you won't be able to read any details until Ashtakavarga. So that's like a key principle of Ashtakavarga that without following and keeping at the foreground of your mind, you're not going to be able to do the techniques justice, and you're not going to be able to take the techniques deeper. For those of you who know some Ashtakavarga, just based on that, you should be able to go think about your techniques and take them to a deeper level. Okay? So that's what we're going to be focusing on this course. We're going to be exploring this big, wide world of Ashtakavarga. We're going to be pushing the limits to Ashtakavarga and seeing what it can really do. We're going to find some things we like, and then we're going to find some things we're going to like laughing at because they work so badly. We're really going to make this an exploratory course, okay? And through that, learn to have a lot of confidence with what Ashtakavarga can do, and use it, quickly, efficiently, and for what it's designed for, and do all those things well. Okay, thank you.